Good day and welcome to Rocket with Chief, Conversations to Take You Places. I'm your host, Daniel Robus, and I hope you enjoy today's episode, which is packed with information regarding HR systems and the automation of people management across the enterprise. Preparing for this, I'm out of my comfort zone. I have to say I've been selling and implementing HR systems for a very long time. But that's why I bounce with people like Paula, whose world is about relationships and people. And I was wondering, why is this important to me to moderate? Why is it important for me to be part of this? And I came up with the 4 Ps of people. And it's because I want to understand the purpose at work. I want to understand where am I going and what am I doing. I want to understand my position of stability with the work. How do I see where I am in the hierarchy of the world? Where is it moving to? And am I safe? I want to understand the power that I have over my life. And what does that mean from a career perspective, an earning perspective, and a skills perspective? And then what is the practical exchange that I'm getting of value from an organization? What practical skills is the organization giving me, and what are they demanding for that quid pro quo? The takeaway for that as a person, as a holistic individual, I think that I can only get there through a strong HR-focused environment. And I have to say, I'm looking forward to hearing operators of big organizations on how we're getting those things, because I don't think we as industry leaders and management have been bathing ourselves in glory on what are we doing with our employees. And I don't think it's a tool set issue. I think sometimes it's a mindset issue, which is being backed by tools or deficiencies of. So, you guys are experts in your areas. I'm going to be looking to learning as much as possible through this hour and a half that we've got together. And again, I want to thank you for being here and for being brave enough to be in an interactive workshop with us. We wish it could be face-to-face. I think both Paula and I prefer face-to-face. I come with an overwhelming amount of energy, and my friend who I'm about to hand over comes with an overwhelming amount of wisdom. So let me pass the ball to you, Paula, for an intro.
Thanks, Dan. And welcome everybody. It's so awesome to be here. As much as I love being in person, the beauty of technology is we can reach people in all corners of the world and get to hear those global best practices and what's working and potentially what can be improved upon. And as Dan mentioned, my passion area is around relationships, whether that's in our personal space or in our professional space. The core foundation and principles are the same. And as you mentioned, the 4 Ps, I was silently ticking off in my head what that looks like and what we're seeing in some of the stats. COVID has done so much to force us to take a step back and question what is our purpose in life at an individual level, but also at an organizational level. And some of the strategies that we're trying to put in place, those buzzwords, pivoting your business, pivoting your life kind of thing, the big reset button, all of those things. And I think at the end of the day, it's about, purpose has been made out to be this big thing that we have to go find your purpose in life. And I'm not so sure if it's really about purpose, but more around passion. And once we find something that we're passionate about, does that give us purpose? Does that make us jump out of bed every day? And I think at the end of the day, that's what employees are looking for. Employees are looking for that security or stability in terms of a job and where I'm going, but also around the financial, that my basic needs, if you think of Maslow's hierarchy, will be taken care of. But it is also more than that. And I think one thing we've realized is nothing will ever be able to replace human connection. And it's around connection and having those real conversations, which is what we're going to have today, and that mindset about being open to hearing what each other has to say, and then what do we do with that information, and how do we apply that going forward. So I'm very excited about having these conversations today and how we can learn from each other, because we don't know all the answers, but together we can certainly come up with some possibilities and take that forward. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. So as your host for today, I am going to be encouraging chats with you. If you hear something that is of particular interest while Ronnie is talking, share your observation in the chat. If you've got any questions that you want directed at any of the speakers, or you want to go down a path, share it in the chat. The more interactive it is, the more you're going to get out of this session. In addition to that, I'd like to encourage you just to turn off your rings, dings, and pings. What do I mean by that? When your computer camera is off, it's easy to dive into email. Please don't do that. We want you. We want you to be involved. We want you to be checked in, and we want you to have a good session. So what you put in, you will get out of it. And then last of all, before I introduce Ronnie, I hope you're going to show us your wig, because I'm sure it's going to look beautiful. So as I said earlier, I've been in this space for longer than I care to remember. Close on 20 years, I've been working with systems and implementing systems. Hot on my heels has been Ronnie, who has been, we have been dovetailing one another in our careers while he's been at Oracle and in the HR space for all of that time. Ronnie carries a long shadow when it comes to Oracle and has a particular passion for the Oracle enablement that comes through automation and through systems. He has been a solution architect, he's been a speaker, and he's been a thought leader in this space. And we are really privileged to hear from him. Ronnie is going to talk to us now so that we're all on the same field when it comes to what our discussion points are around AI, automation, learning and development, and various other subjects. He is very approachable. So I would encourage you to link with him on LinkedIn, that after this, if you'd like to discuss any topics, you can continue that relationship. Without blowing more wind your way, Ronnie, let me hand over to you.
Thanks, Daniel. Don't set the bar too high so that people have this lesser expectation of what they're going to get from me. Thank you very much for something like that. Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. I've really been looking forward to having this conversation today. I thought what I would do, in the spirit of what it is that we're actually going to talk about during the course of the webinar today, is to really give what we as a global organization have been experiencing and seeing, and the challenges there. And then when we get into the breakout sessions a little bit later, I'm very intrigued to see how much of this applies to Africa, specifically the eastern and western parts of Africa, and how much differences there are in terms of that. So it's going to be interesting for me to hear those views going forward. And I encourage people to post their questions, to ask their questions, and when we get into the breakout session, to make it as interactive as possible. Daniel says I have lots of experience and years of wisdom. I'm not sure that's entirely true. I'm hoping to learn a hell of a lot from today's session. So I think to kick off with, I suppose one of the things that we have all remembered over the last 2 years is how much things have changed in terms of our work-life balance. You know, people talk about this whole idea of working from home, and other people talk about the idea of living at work. So we've had this blurring of, when am I at home? When am I at work? When am I expected to be working? And things like that. And, it's really been a juggling act that we've had to have in terms of, how do we master this working from home? How do we live in the socially distant lifestyle that we find ourselves in today? how do we challenge, the levels of stress and anxiety that we're experiencing are really taking a toll on people. So we have an annual survey that we do called AI at Work. And one of the things that came out of that was that 78% of people said that the pandemic had negatively impacted their health. So, we've had multiple hats that we juggled, whether we're a manager, whether we're a colleague, a teacher, a parent, a spouse, and how all of those things have impacted us going forward and given rises to new experiences. So, if we think about our children, the way they're learning now is very different. We've had homeschooling, we've had different ways of schooling children in there. Doctors' offices and hospitals have become different in terms of how we interact with them, and the workplace from employees has also changed. So while these structures have actually themselves remained the same, how the mindset that we have and the procedures and tools that we need to enter into this new workspace is really becoming a challenge for us. We talk about this concept of working from home, and in all honesty, this isn't something. We've had the concept of work from home for many years, being able to do some work while you're at home, being able to come into the office on a less frequent basis and things like that. But what we've seen with COVID is that it really forced a rapid transition almost overnight, where we've had to change to, I remember from an Oracle perspective, we were told on the Thursday afternoon that the offices will be closed as from Friday until further notice. And fortunately for me, working in an Oracle environment, we had the technologies in place. So Friday morning came and I carried on working as if nothing had actually changed. And one of the interesting things that's actually come out of this is that a lot of organizations have realized that their productivity has actually increased by having people not being stuck in traffic and being frustrated, sitting in the traffic. And by the time they get to work, they're almost demotivated. Whereas being at home, it's been a lot more relaxed and people have actually put a lot more time into it. So, they're seeing an increase in productivity, which I think was a bit of a surprise, for some people. One of the other things that we've also seen as a result of the change is that the way we manage people has also changed. A lot of people have had their employees and their subordinates in the office with them. They can see what they're doing. They can encourage them. They can help them. But working remotely has actually changed all of that in terms of how managers need to deal with people. And quite often they've always been able to turn to HR to say to them, can you help me with performance issues that we're having, or how am I going to increase engagement? And areas around wellness have now become very, very important. Now, these are all things that managers in the past have been expected to do, but they've relied largely on HR to provide them with that assistance. Unfortunately, now what we're finding is that HR staff are also working from home. So what we're seeing is that the burden is shifting towards organizations to make sure that they've got solutions in place to be able to ensure that the work continues, that they're able to get the information that they need going forward. So there's that aspect from a manager's perspective. And then from an HR perspective, because a lot of the changes have been impacting employees around their engagement, around wellness concerns, stress, and things like that, they're really being looked at as the center of innovation. HR are the people that are going to, really be looked at to drive these changes that are actually happening, and how are we going to adapt from an organizational perspective. So I think it was in Josh Berson's HR predictions that he made. He said a lot of organizations are not ready and not equipped to be able to support these changes going forward. And from an Oracle perspective, we really don't believe that your technology should be what's holding you back. So I think, as we start looking at some of these challenges that we have, what are the areas of focus that we need to be looking at? And obviously one of the first areas that we need to be concerned about is this whole idea of health and safety within the organizations. So when we think about what has happened here, people have had to adapt to working longer hours at home, putting in extra effort, being able to balance this whole work lifestyle. But also because of the pandemic, we need to also look at, what are the things as we start opening up? What are the things that we're going to need to do as an organization around health testing, wellness checks, office cleanliness, health and safety procedures that need to be put in place, the actual structure of the workplace, where you're at. What are you doing around social distancing and things like that? So I think, health and safety is one of those areas that we need to be focused on. When we look at this from a business perspective, some of the things that we need to be considering is, from an office perspective, do we still need to have the same amount of office space? Do we need to relook at what we're doing? At Oracle, for example, we have canteen facilities. Do we still need to provide something like that, or gym facilities? And are people actually interested in that? Are they looking for things more around their family wellness and their personal growth in the organization, rather than having, I don't know, a ping pong table and a beer garden and things like that at the office? So, from an office perspective, we need to start looking at that. And then from an employee perspective, things are changing, and we need to start looking at how do we upskill and possibly reskill for this new world of work that we're actually finding ourselves in. And a lot of that has to do with the technology that is happening. So, what we're seeing is that people are having to change the way they do things. They're having to look at, how do I adopt this new technology? How do I make sure that my internet connection is stable enough to do a Zoom call? Simple things like that. So, and how do I make sure that when I'm doing a Zoom call, that everything is working, my background is clear, and I don't have people wandering around naked behind me and stupid things like that. So, this upskilling and changing of what we need to do is quite important, in terms of making sure that we don't just, stay where we are and try and survive this whole pandemic, but actually, how do we start looking at thriving? So upskilling and reskilling has become important. And what we've also seen is, with a lot of industries, if we specifically look at things like hospitality, retail, and airline industries, they've been really, really seriously impacted by this, not being able to provide what they would typically provide from a service perspective. And a lot of organizations have actually had to let go of people. And, these people now have had to look at, what are the alternatives available? So one of the examples that we actually saw from an Oracle perspective was at Scandinavian Airlines, where they let go of most of their cabin crew. And what they did was they partnered with an organization, a foundation, that was helping out in hospitals and things like that. And interestingly enough, a lot of the cabin crew on airlines have actually been trained in medical procedures. If somebody on the plane gets sick or has a heart attack or something like that, the cabin crew actually know how to deal with that. And they also know how to deal with unruly passengers. So being able to quickly reskill and adapt into this hospital type of environment where they could provide services was actually quite interesting. And I think a lot of industries have repurposed what they were doing. I know in the motor industry, a lot of the organizations were adapting their tools and technologies to be able to create ventilators and things like that. So this whole upskilling, reskilling has made significant changes to organizations in what they do, but also in how they do that. A third area I think that is becoming more and more important, and I'm sure we're going to be touching on this during the course of this morning, is this whole idea of diversity and inclusion within the organizations. And it's always been something that is there, at a C-level focus, where they've been looking at things like that. But it's not enough just talking about it now. It's really time for us to start taking action. What we're seeing in a lot of organizations is this, they've got the diversity and inclusion processes there, but it's really not given any authority as such to actually do things. So, we need to look at, are we doing this purely from a compliance perspective to make sure that we are meeting the numbers in terms of our diversity? Or is this something that we need to embrace as an organizational culture, and actually, the more the diverse an organization is, the better it is for that organization, not only for the people, but for the organizations in terms of having synergies of different ideas and different ways of doing things going forward. Another area that really is becoming important, and I think, I spoke about the fact that, the technology allowed us at Oracle to be able to adapt very quickly. And I think organizations are looking at, how can they become more agile in terms of what it is that they do. We've seen, with COVID, basically we need to expect the unexpected. We don't know, what is likely to happen. A couple of years ago, I was very fond of doing talks and presentations around, what are the predictions from an HR perspective over the next 3 years, 5 years, or whatever the case may be. I don't think there's anybody at the moment who's prepared to make a prediction for the next 6 months, let alone, what is likely to happen in the next 2 or 3 years down the line. So I think agility within an organization is something that we need to be focusing on and looking at very, very seriously. And then with this change that we've had in terms of our work-life balance and things like that, I don't believe that we're ever going to go back to normality again. I think this is normality, and we move forward from here rather than saying, we'll wait until everything returns to normal. I don't think that's actually going to happen. So then, having had a look at what are the challenges that we've had and what are the focus areas that we need to be looking at, I think we need to also start looking at, what are the things that we from an Oracle looked at when we started seeing all of these changes. And obviously, one of the first things that we did was that we looked at our health and safety module, and we said, what we will do for anybody that is using our solution at the moment is we will make our health and safety module freely available to all of our customers for the duration of the pandemic, so that they could track and analyze health and safety issues, identify which of their staff were at high risk, which of them had caught the virus, who received vaccinations, et cetera, so that organizations had some sort of control on that. What we've done subsequent to that is we've really developed something that we refer to as our employee care package, really to help organizations make work more human there. And some of the things that we look at from that perspective are things like our journeys. So journeys help you to guide your employees during various milestones that they have, whether it's a promotion, whether it's safe travels for employees that are returning to work, what are the things that they need to do if they're traveling, what are the precautions that need to be taken and things like that. And journeys can really be a multitude of different things that help employees and guide them through a journey, a process of going through that particular event and reaching particular milestones going forward. One of the things that we've also had for a while, but has really come to the fore, is this whole concept of work life. And it's really designed to support the well-being with a more meaningful work culture within the organization, being able to build camaraderie and compassion, that helps your community to actually recover during this crisis and post-pandemic on there. Another thing that has become very important, especially because of the remote connections that people have, is that we have a concept called connections. And that really enables our employees to find ways of connecting with peers, with colleagues, finding other people that have similar interests to them, and being able to work together. Together with that, we've also brought in what we refer to as opportunity workplace, where people can actually go and see what are opportunities for me to develop the additional skills to be able to reskill within the organization rather than trying to find that outside, and being able to identify, gig opportunities within the organization where, for example, there might be an opportunity to do some graphic design, that it's something that I have an interest in. I'm not necessarily particularly good at it, but I can grow my skills and I can contribute towards the organization by enrolling and being a participant in a project that is actually being done, where I spend maybe an hour or two a week helping out. And so I developed my skills on that. And then the final area that we look at is really around the whole analytics, where we get now better insights into the business, being able to connect information across the company, whether it's around financial information, around employee information, the impact of the employee changes on the financial status of the organization, but also being able to track and analyze, COVID cases, vaccinations, and things like that. And then what we've also incorporated in that is a digital assistant, where even though I'm working at home and I might be working at 10 o'clock at night, I can go in and get personalized responses to any HR-related questions that I have, whether that's over SMS, voice, social, whatever the case may be. So we've really, from an Oracle perspective, made a concerted effort to help organizations with that agility and flexibility going forward. So I think, Dan, that was sort of what I wanted to cover today. I hope I haven't
Don't stop. Don't wrap up. Don't wrap up. I want to ask you one question before we go into our breakout rooms.
Great. Go ahead.
If there was one question for the HR leaders that we have here, one question you would like to get an answer to, and it's got to be succinct because we're on 30 seconds. What would the question be, Ronnie, that you want the HR leaders specifically to think about?
So I think for me, aside from all of the different areas that I've touched on, the one that I think has the most focus is around diversity. What is it that you as an organization are doing from a diversity perspective? And are you actually embracing it? Because to give
don't answer. You can't say because your time's up. Guys, that is
shut up.
No, don't shut up. Just stay there. We're going into a different role with you. And
Cool.
Ronnie, as usual, you've put the bar where Oracle wants the bar to be. And I think it's something that organizations aspire to from an enablement perspective. And that's the mindset. Folks, if you can achieve everything that Ronnie has just spoken to us about, from the 4 key areas, diversity, upskilling, AI, and data-driven decision-making, well, then you probably are a leader in this area and are lecturing, not on here. We understand that your nirvana is where we need to go to. When we break out, we want to talk around what is the practicality of that. So I'm really quite excited for our breakout sessions. A couple of house rules. We're a loving, caring environment, which means please turn your camera on so we can see you. You can ask questions in the chat in the breakout room, or global questions. So Deborah, I can see you've got lots of questions you want to ask. We have got a multifaceted group from Oracle, from Paula, from Dan, from everyone here. We want to have discussion. That discussion starts with you. So this is a dive-in, opt-in HR discussion. You have to participate. I will run around the block in my underpants.
Oh, that I have to see. If somebody's got the answer, please. Oh, there we go. We've got Owen.
We've got Owen, but that's not fair. That's not fair. Okay, go, Paula.
Well, firstly, thank you to my group for those that participated and contributed their insights. We had some quite interesting discussions around the questions that we did get to pose. There were so many more we could have asked. So definitely around using systems from a communication and an accountability point of view, and being able to look at productivity levels. We looked at how it's being used in terms of improving systems, so around policies and procedures, and especially around staff turnover. And unlocking talent potential. Quite a few of our people in our group were at startup stage, so they hadn't yet implemented systems, but I think they were welcomed the discussion to give them some insights as to potentially what to prepare for, what to put in place for when they start growing. One insight that came out was around the employee experience in terms of benefits and perks, and that there was a skew now towards non-monetary benefits as opposed to in the past. And one of the examples mentioned was transport costs being covered. And then however, one of the sort of negatives that came out of that was where, even though we may be working in the cloud, and that's supposed to make us more integrated, what was being experienced in some areas was that there were more silos. And that was posing a new challenge, and how to overcome those challenges. And then in some instances, there seems to be a resistance in terms of embracing new technology. And how do we embrace technology to be more effective and streamlined and efficient in that? And then around how do we use technology from a skills gap perspective, and really looking at identifying those gaps, and then the training and the systems that we put in place. And it seems like training from those that did share is still a little bit more in terms of in-person and manual, as opposed to e-learning and using data and robotics and AI, and that to actually carve out individuals' learning paths and skill gaps and skills development. That's what came out of our room in the short amount of time that we had, just saying hashtag.
Paula, it sounds like you had a good discussion and a good interaction. And my first is that just for everybody that was participating, it was really great. And there were some mic drop moments. And one of them that came through was talking around how we work and how do we embrace work and what do we expect from our employees. For me, I'd prefer a hybrid environment where I can choose what days time I want to work, from home or office. And I think what really works is when you have clearly set expectations and deliverables with commensurate timeframes. And that talks around performance management and a performance agreement between the employee, the management, and the company. And, I don't know how you plan on doing that for 2,000 people if it's on a manual basis. That we have to bring automation into the HR space so that we can bring the human back into HR. When we were talking around the great resignation, Yawende said, no, we've got the great immigration. And from a perspective of an African challenge, we're losing our top skilled people over the water. And I think a lot of it has got to do with stability in the country itself and purpose in work on where we are going. I'm so tired of losing people to Australia and Iran. I think I want to stab it on the map every time I see it, because we need to be building Africa from within Africa. That does say that more and more performance management metrics need to be clear so we can see who's in danger of leaving and what are the life events that are happening. Because mental health and well-being is so important to us, the structure around what we are doing, and what are those external influences, those factors that we get into that sometimes get glossed over. We had a joke also about Nigerian folk never turn off. So what is this work-life balance? It isn't. Nigerian culture is around working all the time. And what do we need to do then as HR people to ensure that we can uplift folk into understanding that working 24 hours a day is not necessarily the best thing. You can have work and a hobby, and that burnout comes from working all the time. And somebody I think it was Deborah again. Deborah said quite a few really wise things for us, but burnout is a policy failure which is not managed by people. People managers must drive the culture, and we need to take that away. And then just in wrap up, when we had 1 minute, I asked people to just pop in thoughts of what HR should be focused on going forward. And they were saying, HR2, thank you, skills development. The thank you, I think, was aimed at everybody just for participating. But thank you to our employees for being there, for allowing us to do what we do, for keeping the companies going and not seeing it just as a job, seeing it as more. Key to the current trend of work is diversity, said Deborah. Culture and compensation we need to focus on so that we can keep people and stop this immigration. We need to bring back human in HR, which I really enjoyed that. Inclusion. We need to be building a great culture. HR can't build a great culture. We can enable one, but that's a different one. Employee experience management, orientation and benefits, And then there we go. So that was our chat. If you want to add to that, because I missed anything in my notes, jump it into the chat as well. There was lots of wise people in our session, and just from my side, thank you. It was really interesting. So now we've given it. We have got Q&A. We've got the great Ronnie. We've got the amazing Paula. We've got the above average Dan, and we've got lots of people around who work in different environments. If you have any questions, put your mic on, you don't even have to raise your hand. You can just make comments, or else I'd like Ronnie, if you've got anything that came out, or Zoe, your microphone's on, if from the rooms, from different perspectives, please give us your 2 minutes on each. So here's looking at you, Ronnie.
So I was hoping somebody else was going to take the baton that you offered so kindly, Dan. I think, one of the things that came out fairly strongly in our session that we had was this concern around communication. And I think, in any sort of relationship, whether it's a work relationship, whether it's a family relationship, or whatever the case may be, communication is actually key. And I think a lot of people shy away from it. We saw a lot of people listening into the conversations, but not actually participating per se. And I think it's important that everybody needs to be able to have their say. And again, I go back to the importance of this whole, not just diversity, but inclusion, and having that inclusion capability where people feel comfortable to express themselves and being able to do that communication. I think it is so critical, because it is only through that communication that we as organizations are going to learn. And the example that came out in our session was around, non-monetary benefits that organizations are looking at. It's not just about going to work for a salary at the end of the month. If the reason you're going to work is to get a salary at the end of the month, you need to be looking for another job, because you're never going to be happy. But you need to be able to communicate with your managers. And I think perhaps in an African environment, we're a little bit more reticent in terms of sharing, with people and saying, this is something that's really important to me. I'd like you to consider it. Even if it doesn't actually happen, having that communication creates that awareness. So I think, as soon as we start having more inclusion, not just diversity, the better things are going to be. And the way we achieve that is through communication, for people to be able to feel a sense of belonging within the organization.
Awesome. No. I like that. Paulie, you wanted to add in there what you wanted to add in?
Yeah, and just Ronnie, you've touched on an important thing, and I'm seeing it in a lot of the networks and the organizations that I'm in. This word that's been thrown around called psychological safety, in terms of creating safe spaces to be able to speak up and speak out. And part of it talks to our culture and leadership in terms of creating that safe space. But I think part of it also talks to us about being brave enough to speak up and share and have our voices heard. I've learned over the years there's no such thing as a stupid question other than the question that hasn't been asked. And that's the way that we learn from each other, is by asking those clarifying questions. So yeah, definitely. I agree with what you said there.
I purposefully didn't give feedback on one of the first questions you asked, Ronnie, and your last question you asked, which was diversity and inclusion. And I actually wanted to end on this point. So this is probably going to be my swan song, and then I'll be handing over. But we had a very interesting start to our discussion. And we were talking about what does diversity mean and what does it mean for the job. And everyone was very clear in saying that it doesn't matter if you come in with pink hair, 7 earrings, and you're in love with someone that's purple. We want you to do the job. And that's what the organization is looking for. But when we're in the street and walking on the pavement, that's very different. And that made me think and think about what is our role as HR practitioners. And we actually my conclusion is, my hypothesis is that if you're in HR, either you wanted to get a job or you felt a calling for people. And if it's the second, then this stance is speaking to you. Your job is to love. Your job is to love whoever comes through your doors in whatever shape, way, or form they do, so that they can be the best person that they can be for your company. And that means you almost need to leave your prejudice and your predispositions at the door and embody what that company wants from you so that they feel safe. Because if they can't feel safe at work, how are they meant to feel safe anywhere? And I find it really difficult for this because of my ingrained prejudices. So I'm not saying that we're going to get it right, but diversity and inclusion should be a bar above that we set so that people can come to us and can know that they've got a shelter from the storm. Because I think as Africa develops, this is the one thing that's going to keep the artists and the dreamers and the different people who think in their own ways that change organizations in our teams. And it's really tough. It's just a thought from my side on that first bit. And hopefully the data is going to speak to how we can keep the best people. And Ronnie's vision that he painted about the system working in all areas is one that we should be embracing, because it buys us time to be HR practitioners. And HR practitioners should be with people. They shouldn't be with spreadsheets. That's my 5-second overview. Wanjala, I am going to think about your comment, and I don't have an answer. Maybe Paula does. And then I'm going to hand back to Carrie and Zoe.